Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Leading the Way Forward in Unprecedented Times, but with Tricia Nadiff as our presenter. We're really excited to have you here today. My name is Lucy, and I'm going to be your host for today. And before we begin, just a small bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's webinar, so you'll get a link to the recording and the slides. We also do a blog post that has a great summary of what we covered, which is a great shareable item, and we answer the Q&A in there as well. And so speaking of those questions, you'll see our webinars are in Zoom. The Q&A box is right at the bottom center of your screen. Any questions that you have during the broadcast, you can pop them right in there. We also welcome comments. I think this topic is of a lot of interest to a lot of us right now, and people have some really interesting things to share. So please go ahead, put any questions, any comments as they come up to you, and we'll stop a couple times during the broadcast to share those and discuss those with Tricia. But any questions that we don't get to during the broadcast, we will answer you afterwards. You'll hear from us directly, and we'll also use that Q&A as part of our blog post, so you'll be able to see what other people have been answering. There's usually a lot of really interesting discussion on these topics. And I just want to introduce you briefly to who MRG is and who will be taking you through the content today. So here at MRG, we're a global leader in designing assessments that impact people in profound and meaningful ways. We have solutions for leadership, personal development, motivation, sales, service. They're insightful instruments, they're research-backed, and what we want to do is just create action-inspiring feedback and help foster a deeper self-awareness. That's a huge part of what we do, and obviously very relevant to our discussion today. And we've been doing this for nearly 40 years, not me personally, but MRG. And our assessments have been used by thousands of certified practitioners in countries around the world. So we have a lot of research, and that is where we derive some of the content that we'll be sharing with you. And your presenter today is Tricia Nadiff, who is probably familiar to you if you've been working with MRG for any amount of time. She's been working with individuals and teams and organizations for over 30 years, consulting, coaching, product design, research, and she shares MRG research and insights around the world. Just yesterday, she was actually presenting here in Maine virtually, but at the Maine HR conference. You may have also seen her at events like ATD or the Society for Consulting Psychology annual conference. She's been a TEDx speaker. She's contributed to Association Coaching Magazine. So we love to share. Tricia loves to share. And that's what we're doing here today. So I believe that's all I have by way of introduction. Again, use that Q&A liberally. We're happy to field your questions. And with that, I will hand it over to Tricia.
Thanks, Lucy. Welcome, everybody. I don't know if you are having the same experience I have, but my inbox has been full of dealing with COVID, dealing with leadership in crisis, how to handle your business during this unprecedented time. So in a way, I think we've been flooded with this content, and at the same time, we felt in MRG's journey that we might have some things to share that would be helpful to all of us. I think if you've been with us on any of these webinars or have been a part of the MRG community, you know that building a learning community is really part of our value system. And so for those of you who are new to us, we really invite you to be in community with us. And as Lucy shared, share your insights, share your wisdom, share your perspective, share the resources that perhaps are helping you right now. To the extent that you are willing, we would love to hear them, and we will share them. Don't worry about keeping track of what's in the Q&A or what people are offering. We'll roll that up for you so you'll all get it in a few days after the webinar. So today's agenda, we're going to be spending time in 3 different areas. We're going to talk about what's happening to our brains right now, do a little bit of a neuroscience walkabout, and talk about how we can be helpful to our brains right now. We're going to talk a little bit about leading from the inside out and how it's important for those of us who are helping leaders and those who are in leadership positions to really take care of themselves first so that they can be present for others. We've done some research in the space around what leaders can do to handle this uncertainty and to lead in this space. As Lucy said, we've been around for quite a while. So we were working with leaders in the dot-com bubbles of the 80s and 90s, in the recessionary periods in those 2 decades. We were working with leaders after 9/11. We were working with leaders through and after the Great Recession. And we are here today navigating yet another crisis, albeit this one global and unprecedented, at least for all of us on this webinar today, unprecedented in our lifetimes. So we have learned quite a bit, and we use both our research and our practice to help unpack what can be useful in the leadership space now. And finally, we've been doing a fair amount of work in the space around shared leadership, and we want to talk to you about a little bit about how we see leadership working as it becomes more complex, and certainly as it is more complex now. So let's jump in. The first space for us is really focusing on what's happening to us biologically, and in particular what's happening with the brain. We have been students in the neuroscience space for about 10 years now. We will be students of the space, I think, until we all retire. If you're not already engaging and learning in this space, we would really encourage you to do so. There's great information out now that's very, very practical for us. And certainly it's very relevant to what's happening to our minds now. We love this quote from Aristotle, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. It won't surprise you probably, because we're an assessment company, that we believe self-awareness is the cornerstone to any developmental path. We believe as people understand themselves better, they can navigate their world of work. In fact, their worlds enlarge much better. And as people understand themselves better, they can do a better job of understanding others with less bias and more knowing about how their self-awareness impacts their awareness of others. So to start us off in the brain space, in that deeper level of knowing, there are a few basic things we need to know about the brain. The first is the overall purpose of the brain is to keep us safe. There are so many mechanisms in the brain that are designed to keep us safe, both psychologically safe and physically safe. Second element, and related to keeping us safe, there are many elements in the brain that are designed to conserve energy. The whole idea of the brain and keeping us safe is the world can be unpredictable, and so we need to reserve energy at all times. So that when unpredictable threats arise, we have reserve energy to respond to that. So because of this dynamic, our brain has evolved to be highly threat sensitive. I love the way Rick Hansen describes this. He says our brain has evolved to anticipate threats that aren't there thousands of times, react in that way, so that when a threat is actually there, we're protected, right? So our brain is hyper threat sensitive. There's this great Mark Twain quote. I won't get it exactly right, but the quote goes something like this, you know, I am now an old man, and in my life, I have suffered a great many misfortunes, most of which have never happened. So it's a great quote to say, right, our brain anticipates threats left and right, many of which will never come to fruition, but our brain is very practiced in this threat sensitive sort of alertness. The other thing that is a byproduct, and particularly of this conserve energy space, is brains are a bit lazy. And by that, we mean that our brains have strong preferences for things that are easier for the brain to do. And in particular, our brain has a preference to default to habits. If you think about it, learning new things takes a lot of brain energy. So if the brain can do the same thing it's always done, it takes a lot less energy. And so there's a strong preference to default to habits. If we've got a lot of good habits, that serves us well. If we have habits that aren't too great, are unhealthy, or are not helpful to our vision for what we want in our lives, it's not so helpful. And in fact, the brain, quite frankly, is pretty agnostic in the creating habits. It will create a bad habit as easily as it will create a good habit. So this default to a more habitual way of engaging really depends upon what habits are programmed in our brains about whether it's more helpful or less helpful to us. There are two large parts of the brain that are helpful for us to understand when we understand how the brain is responding to stress. The first is the older part of the brain. In this image, it's all of the parts that are lighter in color. Part of it's primitive and part of it is newer than the primitive, but still much older. The older parts of our brain control the emotions, what we have commonly called the fight, flight, or freeze responses in our body, which come on automatically when we're under threat and send signals into our bodies to get our heart pumping faster, our lungs breathing faster, so that we're pumping more oxygenated blood into our muscles so that they can respond appropriately. And finally, the older part of our brain, also that habit-forming part of our brain, lives there. The newer part of our brain, and the biggest part of our newer part of our brain, is the prefrontal cortex, and I think probably most of you know that sits in the front of our brain, right behind our forehead. And that prefrontal cortex does a lot of things for us. It's where our higher reasoning happens. It's where our focus and memory happen. It's where we inhibit all those things that we say in our heads, but we know wouldn't be wise to say out loud. It's also where willpower lives. It's a space where planning and organizing happen. It's where automatic decision-making happens in the older part of our brain. That flexible decision-making, really our considered decision-making, happens in the prefrontal cortex. Empathy and our moral decision-making also happens in this area. It's the area where we have patience. It's also the area that we're able to bring forward hope, the sensation, the feeling of hope. And it's also metacognition, where metacognition is. Our ability to observe our own thinking happens in this prefrontal cortex. So all really helpful things in a modern world. However, our brain mechanisms are the wiring and the responsiveness to the world is based on early human encounters. Sort of early human encounters didn't have to fly planes or develop strategies or lead in a modern context or make complex decisions, right? Early human behavior was much simpler. Early human world was much simpler. And our brains really haven't caught up, at least in terms of automatic responses. And so when we look at the brain under stress, we are experiencing things that our ancestors experienced. And in the most basic sense, this is what happens. The older brain comes online, and when the older brain comes online, it shuts off much of the prefrontal cortex functioning. And as a result, the brain in crisis has this heightened sensitivity to threat. It in turn then shuts off the prefrontal cortex, and it shuts off, therefore, those higher order functions. We move to habitual patterns that intensifies. And we end up with a brain that experiences a high level of fear, sometimes anger, certainly anxiety. And as a result, the brain is much more distracted and less focused. So if we look at what is happening for all of us now, and certainly leaders and certainly people in all around us in organizations, this is the state of the automatic brain flow. So what we want to help leaders understand is that they can't serve from an empty vessel. They can't be empty of well-being. They can't be living in this threat-sensitive state unattended and then expect that they can turn and serve others in the leadership role. So what we have to do is help leaders see the need to serve, to lead from the inside out, to take care of the aspects of their being that bring them into a more centered space, that allow them, in fact, to bring that prefrontal cortex back online, because as we all know, leadership is a very complex mental function. We need to be centered in order to bring on the mind, to behave in ways that have people trust us and be confident in us. And we need to bring that online so that we can engage with others in a less anxious way. So there is, thankfully for all of us, so much research has been done in the last 20 years around the evidence of what helps the prefrontal cortex come online, what calms down that older brain system. And the menu is actually quite rich. So there are many studies that show all of these things supporting a brain that comes back onto center, where the prefrontal cortex becomes more active and the older brain calms down. Many of these you've heard before, you know, the basic care of the body, good sleep patterns, good eating patterns, the ability to spend some time exercising. Now, this isn't training for a marathon. This is just getting your cardiovascular system going. Ideally for a half an hour, 20 minutes to a half hour, 5 to 6 times a week. Spending time outdoors. Now, this is just like walking outside. For some reason, probably based on sort of our ancestors, our brains calm down when we're in the out of doors. There are a lot of things in the meditative, the broader meditative space, basic meditation practices. Even without meditation, breathing exercises help. In fact, slow, deep breathing helps bring that prefrontal cortex back online. Things like journaling, listening to music, and gratitude practices all have demonstrated that they have a calming effect on the brain. Some of you might have heard of EFT, stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, more commonly called tapping. There are some great resources there. It basically involves speaking and tapping on meridians on the upper body that help release emotions and bring about a calm state. There's some great YouTube videos on this. It may be out there for some of you and certainly some leaders you coach, but there's really good science around how that calms the brain. Humor actually is a great tool. There are terrific humor videos on YouTube. It's why we like those silly dog and cat videos, the things that make you chuckle. If we can go for a good belly laugh, it absolutely calms the brain, that pleasure aspect of humor. Having a reasonable schedule. Schedules and structure actually help during this period of time. There's some really, so here's a very interesting thing to know about the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex comes back online when it feels like it has control. But here's the happy coincidence. It only has to feel like it has control. So the illusion of control makes the prefrontal cortex come back online. And so anything that we can control, it's why maybe cleaning out our closets or organizing the garage or having dinner at the same time or having set up a work from home space that we go to every morning. Those small things that might seem inconsequential actually reassure the prefrontal cortex that we have some control in this current situation. So any of that work, making certain what you can make certain in an uncertain time, helps the brain a lot. Our brains are wired to connect, support, and help other people. We get a reward sensation in the brain, which builds the connection between the older part of the brain and the prefrontal cortex. It makes them talk to each other. So, and again, this is not to put a big guilt on people. You know, you're trying to take care of your family, you're navigating working from home and homeschooling, you're concerned about loved ones who don't live with you and their health. You're trying to either coach your clients and or lead people you're responsible for. And oh, by the way, you should be taking care of the community. it's not meant to put that burden on, but if you can understand what you're already doing in terms of caring for others, that brain connection between the older brain and the prefrontal cortex, actually they start talking to each other more frequently, right? And then just the basic connection. I think one of the things that's happening now is we're doing a lot. The rate of busyness has really increased, but the chance to actually sit down and have a cup of tea with the people that we're actually living with, or having a time to connect with family virtually, to just check in, no other purpose, to actually use words of care and kindness and love with each other. Those words matter in the brain. So the ability to share that deep human connection, to go to that deeper place, actually is a very reassuring place for the brain. There's a whole bunch of things that we know that actually exacerbate the sense of stress right now. There can be a long list, but these are some of the things that actually boomerang for us and put us more in a stress state. So each one of us knows how informed we need to be calm, versus what the over-informed state does for us. So there's a balance of how we engage in the news right now. Some people are staying completely away from it. That's the right space for them. Some people are checking in just really quickly every day. Some people are asking people that they know or people that they live with to just give the highlights, so they don't start going in online, which then you drill down and until you're the point of your mind is going crazy. So we really have to watch how much we're taking in of current state and how that affects our ability to be calm. Overindulgence in any way, watching too much TV, eating too much, drinking too much, smoking too much Zoom time, right? Our ability, if we're doing some of the things on the prior list, what happens with that is we become more in tune to early signals of, okay, this isn't helpful, right? In some cases, you'll feel it in your stomach. In some cases, you'll feel it in your chest. Some people have a lot of sensitivity in neck and shoulders. Some people will notice when their mind starts getting buzzy. Some people will notice sort of an agitated feeling of anxiety. So the more we are in touch with our own felt experiences, the more we'll know what overindulgence is for us. Not maintaining boundaries. This is at home. We need the quiet time. We need the walk by ourselves. We need to know that we have some control over our time. We also need boundaries around work, right? Now that we're working from home, we need to establish those time boundaries so that we know when work stops and starts. We also need emotional boundaries, right? We know there are people that we talk to that are neutral. There are people that we talk to that can be draining, and there are people who we talk to where it's uplifting. And so we need to be aware of those personal boundaries as well. Trying to be perfect or having this idealized image of if you were really doing this thing well, this is how you would be, and oh, by the way, you're not doing it. We need to forgive ourselves and others. We need to be compassionate with ourselves and with others. And we really need to have realistic expectations. Again, if we're doing some of the things in the prior slide, then it really helps us to be connected to what is good for me and good for us right now. As I said before, the brain likes it when we have a sense of control, and it doesn't like it when we focus on things we have no control over. So it is really an important time to be able to bring your brain online to ask, do I have control over this? If not, it's not helpful for me to focus on it. Can I have some aspect of control over it? What is that aspect? And let me engage in that space. So let's take a minute and check in with each other. Let's share with each other, how are you doing in maintaining your own well-being? How are you doing in terms of filling your own vessel. I'll be honest and share, I think I'm between a 2 and a 3. I've been really over busy, so I would say some days are okay and others are not okay. I'm trying to head to 2. So that's where I am in terms of my honest assessment of how I'm doing these days. So share, nobody will know what if it's you or not. Just let us know how is it going from your perspective.
Thanks, everyone. We're seeing those responses start to come in. I'll just give it another second. Just about everybody has shared with us. And
right after this poll, we're going to do some questions and comments. So if you're done with the poll and you've got some things to say, comments or questions, just put them in the Q&A box.
Absolutely. Yes, pop those in. All right. I think just about everyone has shared. Let me see. And we'll share the results now. All right. I believe everyone can see those. So 16%
Nice.
are feeling great. Yeah. And 39% at pretty good. 43% at some days are okay. I think I was in there. And 2% feeling like haven't been able to do much to take care of themselves.
So hopefully for those of you who are doing great, I'll try not to be too jealous. That's terrific, but we've got, I'm sure you're doing a lot of things on that Be Well page and are avoiding the things on what exacerbates. For those of us who are in the 2s and 3s, I think we just have to be attached to that list and spend some time thinking about what will work for us. And if you've not been doing much, I hope it feels okay to be with this community, and perhaps you've gotten a few ideas that might serve you well. All right, so let's keep going. We've got a few moments for questions and comments. So Lucy.
Yes, one that came up, and I believe you've addressed this maybe a bit with the boundaries, but can you comment on the challenge between connecting and if for someone who's particularly empathetic, absorbing the plight of others, especially in this current time where a lot of connection may revolve around discussing stressful topics?
It is a really hard time for the empaths, in our world right now. I think that it is. That's why I love you can't serve from an empty vessel. It's the 5,000-year-old equivalent of put your mask on yourself before you help others with their mask. I think it's really important for us to see that self-care, that well-being as as the precursor to us being able to sustain our empathy, right? If we go down with the count, then we're not going to be any good to anybody. And so we need to keep, we need to serve our own well-being in order to take care of others. The other thing I would say too, and this, we need to prioritize who needs our care the most, right? Because there are people who will ask of us until we say no. And we need to be able to recognize how we parse out the limited amount of care we have to offer to others. So to pause and take some time and actually be strategic about where your limited amount of empathy goes. We have any comments or resources to share at this point, Lucy, sorry.
A couple more good questions. One comment that I thought was interesting, one of our beloved international partners in France brought up that in regard to the polling, not everyone is experiencing the same set of circumstances right now. We do have an international audience on this webinar and an international audience as part of our MRG universe. And the level of disruption that people are experiencing in relation to this is very different depending on where they are in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And do you want to do any more questions, Lucy?
It does look like we should move on and we can get back to some of these at the end. And then again, folks, put them in anytime, comments, questions. We'll answer more at the end. And any that we don't get to on the broadcast, we will follow up both in the blog Q&A and individually as well. Thanks, and keep them coming.
Thanks, Lucy. All right, so let's start moving into the leadership space. And so let's Look at how employees are feeling right now, right? Their brains are doing the same thing that we all just talked about. So we have employees who are feeling afraid, understandably. Many are maybe furloughed or laid off or afraid of those things, unsure of what's going to happen. Their brains are distracted. They're feeling anxious. Of course, uncertain. Nobody has a crystal ball right now, so it's really hard to know how things are going to play out at the macro level, at the local level, and certainly at the organizational level. They are overwhelmed. You know, we have added a whole list of things to what people need to do, how people are working, navigating the balance of what's happening at home with what's happening at work. As a result, you know, our brains are more scattered than probably they have ever been. It is remembering that prefrontal cortex is the organizing part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that helps us focus. It's the part of the brain that helps us prioritize. And we've got just less prefrontal cortex energy engaging in the brain right now. And a lot of these folks are feeling alone and isolated. So we've got many employees who may be living by themselves or just, you know, isolated from their support system. I think a lot of people are recognizing now, those people who work in teams and collective environments, that physical presence does a lot to help people stay okay and engaged. So this is the state of the people that leaders are leading right now. So what do they need from leaders? They need transparency, having a sense of that I have all the information that's available, helps with that certainty piece. They need communication. People need communication all the time, but when people feel anxious, they need even more communication. It's hard for people to remember things, so we need repetition in communication. They need emotional support from their managers, and they need managers to be connected and facilitate connection, so that when we're on Zoom, we should be spending at least some time engaging in personal connection as well as work-related connection. They need leaders to prioritize for them. Right? In a way, leaders are acting like an additional prefrontal cortex for their teams right now. Where possible, leaders need to establish certainty. Timelines need to shrink right now, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen next month or in the fall or next year. And so we can give more certainty on a short-term timeline. This is what we need to work on this week. This is what the organization is working on this week. This is what's happening for us this week and likely next week, right? So shorter timelines where we can create more certainty. And also related to that, smaller goals. You know, we've all been working on strategy for the longest time, right? And what we need to accomplish this year and what we're heading into next year. And we can't do that right now. So we need to break our goals up into smaller goals so that the brain gets the satisfaction of accomplishment and achievement. We need acknowledgement from the leaders. Leaders need to say, I know what you're going through. I really appreciate what you were able to do on this yesterday. The brain needs an uplift in the positive emotion state, and acknowledgement can do that. And people need flexibility. We're dealing with crazy schedules. We're needing to balance what's happening at work and at home, and we need our leaders to understand that space and be able to make space for us. So as I shared with you, MRG has been studying leadership in uncertain times for almost 4 decades now. And we've learned a lot along the way. And so we went back into our data to see what we could, how we could understand what leaders who are likely able to be a little bit more effective now, what does that look like? And so many of you know our leadership assessment, and for those who don't, this is where the data comes from. We use our Leadership 360 assessment, and it measures 22 discrete behaviors that make up the building blocks of leadership, along with 31 competencies that measure traditional leadership competencies of effectiveness. And what we do in this research, we're looking at a particular set of competencies, a subset of these 31, and asking the question, leaders who are really good in the subset of these competencies, what behaviors are they engaged in that distinguish them from leaders who are not quite as effective? Those of you who know the LEA are familiar with this. The LEA looks at 22 different behaviors, broken down 6 different functions. Creating a vision is the thinking element of leadership. Developing followership are the behaviors that are engaged when we want to bring people on side and convince them to follow us. Implementing and following through are the behaviors we engage in to accomplish things and bring things to the finish line. Achieving results are the behaviors associated with you using power in positive ways to stretch people to help them achieve more. And then team playing are the behaviors leaders engage in to build close connections with others. This study included over 5,000 participants from multiple countries and multiple industries. The mix of gender is almost 60% men and 35% women, with 6% not reporting. A mix of generations, with the biggest element being Generation X, which at this current time, it's the generation that holds the highest number of leadership roles across organizations. Multiple job functions, multiple management levels. It's a real broad cross-section of leaders. So we look at, and we've done this for the past little over a decade, we have looked at this combination of competencies. We believe in order for leaders to be really effective in these times, they need to be connected with people. They need to be good at connecting with people, working with people. They need to instill confidence. People need to find them credible. In order for my brain to be reassured in you as a leader, I need to believe in you as a leader. And it's complex to think in these times of uncertainty. So we need leaders who can be sharp intellectually, who can be cognitively agile, and work with the demands of the mind really effectively. We use a variety of competencies to build these domains. So for the people domain, we're looking at the competencies associated with building enthusiasm and getting people engaged, really being willing to listen, being an effective communicator, having insight into what's happening with others, and really being able to promote a level of connection that builds engagement. In the ability to really instill confidence in having others feel that you are credible and that they can rely on you. We look at credibility across the constituency with people above the leader and peers and direct reports. We look at the measure of the degree to which people feel overall this person is an effective leader. We look at their ability to step forward and make decisions. We trust in their ability to make decisions. We look at their ability to handle conflict. We want to know how self-confident they are. And we want to know that they're resilient. It's a difficult time, and we want to know that they can hang in there and they can come back from difficult situations. Finally, in the space of being sharp intellectually, we want to know that they can think when it's challenging. We want to know that they can learn fast. In unprecedented times, we need people to be able to think in new ways. We need to know that these people have a good sense of self-awareness, that they can think effectively. It's that metacognition, right? I'm effective at thinking about myself. I know what's happening with me right now. And we need to know they have tolerance for ambiguity, because in times like this, that there's no roadmap, right? So take a minute. Of course, all 3 of these are important, but think about the leaders you're working with. And what aspect of leadership is currently most challenging for them right now? They might all be challenging, but when you think of them, is there something that's harder for them right now? Is it harder for them to connect with people right now? Is it harder for them because they're remote to actually make people feel confident in their ability? Are their brains compromised so much right now that that cognitive functioning is really suffering? Again, all of these are challenges right now, but as you think of the people you're working with and talking with, what would you say is the hardest thing for them right now? What's most challenging?
Thanks, everyone. We're seeing a lot of responses start to come in. And as Tricia said, I know it's a challenging time in many ways, so it probably can be a little bit tough to choose which one, and certainly different for the individual. Give it just another moment or two. All right, thanks everybody.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Okay.
That's really interesting. I actually, if I was going to be a betting person, I would have bet intellectually sharp would have come up higher. So connecting with people, of course, we're remote now. So it is hard. I think we realize a lot of the connection with people happens in sort of subtle, often nonverbal ways that are a little bit harder, sometimes a lot harder to get off of Zoom. Demonstrating credibility and confidence, again, it's hard to pick up. Some of this is a little bit more kind of what we pick up in unintentional ways, and we also pick up with time. And we're having, I think, in some cases, less time together. And then, of course, the intellectually sharp. We know our brains are a little bit more scattered right now. So let's spend some time on these, on the research results of these. So what you're seeing on the left here are the behaviors that we're measuring in the LEA. So leaders who were seen as being very effective at connecting with people, not surprising, were seen as demonstrating empathy more, enthusiasm and excitement more. They're showing, which we need to coach people on Zoom. They need to use this more in their words and their vocal tone. They're communicating more clearly and more frequently, so there's more repetition here, and they're clear and letting people know what's expected. With consensual, they're seeking input, right? They're more likely to ask people for input. They're probably asking more questions right now. They are less autonomous. Self is the behavior of being autonomous in decision-making and in working, so they're less apt to go off by themselves and isolate themselves. They're thinking as strategically as they can, so they're trying to think ahead. They're trying to think about consequences. They're being helpful, right? They're cooperative, they're being helpful, and they're being persuasive. There's a piece here that's saying, come on, let me convince you we can do this, right? Excitement and persuasive together can be very compelling in saying, follow me. When we look at the behaviors that are about credibility and instilling confidence, we see a slightly different, actually quite a different set of behaviors. We see strategic here, as we saw before, but it's very important here, right? I need to know if I'm going to feel confident. I need to know that you're thinking about what's coming down the pike, what's going to happen. I need to know that you're informed in a broader way, and that with communication, you're sharing that with me. I need to know that you're transparent. I need you to talk to me. I need you to be clear. I need to feel like you're taking responsibility for this leadership role. I need to know that you're taking initiative, you're reaching out, you're taking responsibility for your leadership role. You're not hiding. You're not waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do. I need to know that you have a body of expertise, right? If you're an HR leader, I need to know that you're an expert. If you're in marketing, if you're in sales, if you're in distribution, if you're in finance, I need to hear your expertise. I need to trust your expertise. I need to know that while you can be engaging, that you can be calm. I need to see you breathe. I need to feel your calm. And again, I need the persuasion. I need you to bring me along, right? I need you to, in part, convince me that it's going to be okay. Interestingly, the intellectually sharp has a lot of overlay with the credibility. So it talks about how important the access to that cognitive thinking is in the credibility space. These behaviors, the list is almost exactly the same, but it's in a different order. So the intellectually sharp, it organizes itself in a slightly different way. But what is here that is not in the credibility is the innovative. We're in an unprecedented time. I need to know you can think outside of the patterns that you have and we have always thought. I need to know you're looking for new solutions. I need to know you're looking for new ways of doing things. I need to know that you're able to be somewhat creative in the way that we're working together now. So if we summarize all of these, there are three real sort of buckets of us. And when we think about our own approach to leadership and when we think about how we can help others and really sort of tie it together. So we need to up our game, if you will, in thinking strategically and bringing our expertise into play and exploring innovative ideas. So when we think about the working of the mind, we need to bring strategy and our expertise and innovation to the fore. They don't need to be on all the time, but we need to make space for bringing the mind online in these different ways. We need to work on our voice and help leaders work on their voice. There are three ways here that we can bring our voice into play in a way that's helpful. We want leaders to be practicing being compelling and being persuasive, to think about what would bring people on side, how we can draw pictures of things for people that make it feel compelling to move forward. We need to balance enthusiasm and calm. Leaders need to understand when I need to build enthusiasm and when I need to bring the temperature down and help people breathe into a sense of calm. We need to be clear and constant in our communication. I think one of the hardest things for leaders, even in regular time, is to understand how important repetition and clarity is. It's even more important now to just, the weekly emails for updates, that checking in on a frequent basis, to not be afraid to ask, is this clear? What do you need in order to feel like you have the information you need? And finally, there's a level of engagement that's important both for the leader and for the people the leader is leading. So leaders need to be compassionate with others. It may be more challenging for leaders who struggle with empathy and demonstrating empathy, but this is the time where compassion is critical. We did a whole body of research on this, and we can share that we share that link with you in the resources for this. But leaders also need to be compassionate with themselves. Leaders need to make time to offer help to others, but they also need to ask for help when needed, right? They need to invite input. Leaders need to be careful not to isolate themselves. They are not in this by themselves, so they need to invite input. And they need, though, to recognize that in order for others to be able to relax their brains, they need to feel confident in the leader. And so the leader needs to show, I'm here, I'm present, I'm taking initiative, and I'm taking responsibility, right? I am sitting in the seat of leadership, and so you can trust that, right? I'm not going to disappear. I think when I think of all this and I think about how challenging it is to lead in normal times, never mind to lead in times of crisis, I think one of the great things we need to teach ourselves and to teach others is to pause before moving forward. I think this idea of pausing before we engage is critical. And so if we can help ourselves and others pause, breathe, observe myself, right? What's happening with me and how do I bring myself into center if I'm not center? And how do I observe the situation I'm in so that I can diagnose what's happening here and what's needed so that I can engage with intention as opposed to engage in a habitual way. So when I engage and afterwards, I can reflect what worked, what didn't work, what happened for me, what happened for them, so that I can mindfully adjust and the cycle begins. And the cycle actually is not that hard if we start with the pause. It's amazing how much knowledge leaders can bring online if they stop to observe first and then make a decision. I think we need to remind leaders that they have to fill the vessel first, and that they can't do it alone, right? And so we need to remind people that this is a hard gig. It was a hard gig in February. It's an even harder gig now. And so I think if you've been with us in the work that we've done in the shared leadership space, you know that we're pretty passionate about destroying the myth of the heroic leader. And that it is our strong belief that we need to move to models and methods of shared leadership. Was important for the past 10 years anyway that we should be doing this. It's really critical now. We've done a webinar on this. We give you the link in this in the resource page, but let me just share with you, there are some pretty simple things that we can be drawing from in the shared leadership space. And these tools are available to us now in this more remote way of leading, right? Co-leadership means actually sharing leadership for a project or an initiative, or in fact, even co-leading weekly team Zoom meetings, right? Actually sharing the space so that you're not alone. If I'm really good at the cognitive place, really helping people understand where we are strategically, but the people place is a little bit harder for me, then wouldn't it be great to co-lead the weekly meetings with a leader who has the warmth, who has the empathy? So co-leading together, we create a shared space where we can sit in the seat where we're most comfortable, but also make sure the full range of what's needed right now is available. Thinking partnerships. If I am engaged in a space and I know I'm not a very structured, organized person, and I have colleagues who actually can help me organize projects to do remotely, then that's a great partnership for me to be in. We talk with leaders all the time in our coaching about running units like micro-organizations. We don't expect CEOs to be experts in marketing and sales and distribution and finance and human resources. There is a C-suite that actually runs the entity that is the organization. We can do similar things with teams, right? It doesn't have to be quite as formal, but there are people on teams who are good at innovation, who are good at organizing and planning, who are good at taking the temperature of the team, who are good at engaging people to be more ambitious, right? So there are opportunities to share the lifting up of a work entity based on what people are have energy for. Peer coaching and peer mentoring, boys, is a nice time to take advantage of this. This is an opportunity for me to meet with a peer regularly, to just download what's happening, to ask questions of each other. There's a great phrase, I think neuroscientists and coaches got together and came up with this, that coaching is like getting a bonus prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex comes online when we're in a safe environment where people ask us thoughtful questions. And so that's what peer mentors and peer coaches could do. So if we could encourage partnerships of, hey, let's just check in with each other every other week for a half an hour, depending upon the time of day, grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or a beer, and just check in and help each other out a little bit. Peer advisory groups are a little bit more formal. It's bringing a group of people together to take time to work on individual issues, so that if we're a peer group of 6, one person brings in an issue and the 5 of us help that person work through the issue. It has the benefit of that individual gets good advisory insights because most of us deal with similar issues. We all get some ideas and we get a boost of confidence, which helps the brain, because I feel like, oh, I really offered something of value there. And finally, we need to be helping organizations, and boys, it's a good time to do it, help them have less hierarchical definitions of leadership. If we help leaders do things like ask their direct reports for feedback and help them stay open to it, that in and of itself expands the idea of where do good ideas come from? Where does leadership in the broader context come from? So we spend more of that time in the shared leadership space, and we'll share that connection with you, that information with you. So here's the bottom line, right? Take care of yourself. Help leaders take care of themselves. Focus on approach to leadership on the things that matter most right now. We can never be all things to all people, but more than ever, it's important for us to prioritize. Harkening back to that question that was asked earlier, we need to focus on where our efforts matter the most. And we can't go it alone, and leaders can't go it alone. So we really need to help ourselves and help others create shared leadership relationships. I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago, and I was really struck by this quote. Let's not rush to go back to normal before we decide what parts of normal are worth going back to. We have an opportunity to reboot here. And I think we can learn a lot of lessons or be reminded of lessons we've known but we haven't been able to implement. I think this is the time for us. So we've got resources, as Lucy said. We're going to send you a whole bunch of things after this, links to things that we have found to be very helpful, Q&A, questions we won't get to that will be helpful, recommendations that other people on the webinar have made. But I think we have time probably for one question, Lucy, before we say goodbye.
Absolutely. A lot of great questions and comments. One was, where have you seen any good examples of shared leadership or co-leadership publicly that might be used as models? Does anything come to mind?
I have a whole bunch of not good models. I'm going to brag about our state right now. So we're in Maine. Lucy and I are in Maine. Our colleagues in the Dublin office are obviously in Ireland, but most of the employees in MRG are in Maine. And for those of you who are not in the States, maybe you've been realizing from the news that the challenging dynamic between the United States federal government and state governments. I have to say that our governor and our head of the Center for Disease Control, the Maine Center for Disease Control, have done a beautiful job over this, really looking at the health dynamics of where we are, the economic dynamics of where we are, and they have been, in my opinion, extremely good in the communication piece. A lot of updated information, but in very clear ways. So that's our little corner of the world, and I think that that's been a beautiful example of that. So I think we need to move on. So I will say my thank yous and let Lucy take over from here.
Yes, and again, thanks everyone for the questions and comments. Still a moment or two to pop those into the Q&A, and we will get to them at a later time. But we have some more great content coming up. You've maybe seen a lot of us in the last month or so, and that will continue. We're doing a lot of webinars at this point. So we have employee engagement coming up next week, some great stuff on motivation and bias, and then the science of satisfaction is going into some personal directions data, which is going to be really cool. We do have a certification schedule that's very full coming up as well. Plenty of opportunities to add any of these assessments to your toolkits that you may not have yet. And these workshops, if you are a certified MRG client but haven't seen these, please do take a look at the calendar on mrg.com. They're free workshops, limited attendance, but we're trying to accommodate everyone in multiple sessions. They do require a certification depending on the workshop. Different tools, but a really great chance to connect with MRG experts, to work really interactively with some of your peers and really dive deep into some of these tools. We're very excited about how those have been going, so please join us for those. And I believe that's all we have. Again, any questions that you don't get into the Q&A box that come to you later, you can always email us, research@mrg.com. And keep an eye out for the slides, the recording, and the blog post and Q&A answers that will be coming your way very soon. And please join us for more great presentations to come. Thank you so much for making time for us today. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.